Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the actual physics behind one of the absolute greatest auditory illusions in human music. I'm talking about barbershop harmony. Now, if you've ever heard a top-tier quartet sing a final chord live, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's that unbelievable moment when the sound just explodes. And that brings up a really fascinating central question, doesn't it? How exactly do four individual voices suddenly become this shimmering 8-part chord? We're going to figure out how just four singers can create a massive, buzzing halo of sound that literally rattles the floorboards right under your feet, all without actually singing any louder. I promise you it's not magic, it is pure acoustic science. So here is our roadmap for the journey. First, we'll look at the magic of expanded sound, followed by the physics of the ring. Then we'll break down the 4 strict conditions for locking, how to actually build that barbershop chord, and finally, what happens when physics becomes emotion. All right, let's jump into section 1, the magic of expanded sound. We've got 3 terms to tackle, but really, it's just one mind-blowing phenomenon. First up is the lock. This is that exact, undeniable moment when the chord completely stabilizes and fuses together. It happens when the singers lock in incredibly accurate tuning and perfectly matched vowels. When they do this right, it becomes genuinely hard to pick apart the 4 individual voices. It just sounds completely settled, totally still, and it clicks into this incredible groove like it's finally stopped searching for the pitch. Right after the chord locks, you get what's called the ring. This is a bright bell-like halo of reinforced overtones that just sort of floats above the chord. Now, what's really wild is that people often mistakenly call this ring the 5th voice. But actually, it's not a single extra note at all. It's an entire band of stacked upper partials from all 4 voices reinforcing each other at the exact same time. It is literally a whole choir of overtones. The grand finale of all this acoustic gymnastics is the expanded sound. This is that locked, ringing chord experienced as just sheer, overwhelming size. It blooms outward, carrying significantly more acoustic weight and depth than 4 human voices should physically be able to produce on their own. It totally fills the room, giving you that full-body, goosebump feeling where the whole is massively, massively greater than the sum of its parts. Moving right along to section 2, the physics of the ring. Let's visualize the invisible. So the real trick to understanding this is realizing that every sung note isn't just one pitch, it's a whole stack of pitches. Think of it as a 3-step process. Step 1, your vocal folds vibrate to create a fundamental pitch, let's say 110 Hz. Step 2, that process automatically generates higher frequencies, or overtones, at multiples like 220, 330, and 440 Hz. And here is step 3, the brilliant little musical gift hidden inside. The 4th, 5th, and 6th partials in that stack naturally form a major chord. Seriously, a perfect major triad is literally sitting inside every single note you sing. And this perfectly highlights a crazy difference between 2 totally different acoustic events that are making that sound so massive. On one hand, you have overtone reinforcement. That's real, physical acoustic energy adding together in the air from those coinciding partials we just mentioned. You can literally record that with a microphone. But then you have combination tones. These are phantom pitches generated entirely inside your own ear. When the primary tones are strong and clean enough, your cochlea literally invents a phantom bass note that drops the perceived floor of the chord an entire octave lower. No one is singing it, your brain is just creating it. Okay, on to section 3, the 4 conditions for locking. This is our recipe for reinforcement. Listen, this magical reinforcement does not happen by accident. 4 totally non-negotiable conditions have to be met simultaneously. First, clean phonation. Singers have to balance their breath and fold closure so the tone isn't breathy or forced. Second, matched vowels, meaning perfectly aligning the physical shapes of their vocal tracks. Third, just intonation tuning, which is using pure acoustic ratios. And finally, stillness. They have to sustain the note with absolute minimal vibrato. Otherwise, those fragile frequencies smear and completely break the lock. Let's actually zoom in on that second point for a second. If you sit in on a barbershop reversal, the number 1 instruction you will hear shouted over and over is simply match the vowel. Why is that so crucial? Because your vocal tract amplifies specific frequency regions called formants. Matching a vowel is exactly like printing the exact same font in different sizes. It physically lines up those amplified frequency regions across all 4 singers so the overtones can perfectly overlap and ring out. Now, let's see how tuning builds on top of those aligned vowels. Compare equal temperament, which is how a standard piano is tuned, with just intonation. A piano chops an octave into 12 equal steps, which, believe it or not, slightly compromises the purity of the ratios, causing this sort of unsettled beating interference. But hey, voices aren't tied to physical keys. Singers tune by pure acoustic ratios directly to the root pitch, purely by ear, allowing those partials to perfectly coincide. That incredibly pure, mathematical ratio tuning is the secret sauce that truly locks a chord.
Singers also rely heavily on a resonance tool called twang. It sounds funny, but it's basically an epilaryngeal narrowing, a slight squeeze of the vocal tube right above the vocal folds that pushes a ton of energy into the bright, high-frequency region of the sound spectrum. By adding a consistent, shared baseline of twang, singers focus their acoustic energy exactly where that shimmering ring lives, which perfectly stabilizes the halo.
Let's look at Section 4, Building the Barbershop Chord, its structure, and how to troubleshoot it on the fly. The absolute signature chord of the entire genre is the barbershop seventh, and there's a ridiculously cool mathematical reason for that, and it's tied directly to the numbers 4 through 7. You see, this specific dominant seventh chord beautifully mirrors partials 4 through 7 of a single tone. So because of this, when barbershoppers tune this chord perfectly by ear, the chord is structurally destined to ring. They aren't making it up. They're literally just reinforcing a harmonic structure that already naturally exists in the overtone series itself. But what happens when it just doesn't work? Singers have to make micro adjustments on the fly. If the chord is in tune but absolutely won't ring, the cause is usually equal temperament tuning, so they've got to tune by ear to stop that beating sound. If there's no bright halo at all, well, they've got mismatched formants and need to dial in that target vowel. If the ring vanishes in the middle of a long hold, it means someone's vibrato is widening, so they have to lock it back down to absolute stillness. And if the ring is suddenly lost as the pitch rises, it means the formant has fallen between the partials, so they actually have to modify the vowel slightly. It is just an incredibly precise, real-time acoustic balancing act. Honestly, one of the most surprising parts of all this is how it actually feels to the performers up on stage. They call it the drop in effort. When a chord locks and every single one of these variables aligns perfectly, a singer will suddenly feel the note require way less air and way less physical work to sustain. The shared acoustic reinforcement literally starts doing the heavy lifting for them, so the chord feels like it is effortlessly floating, carried by the ensemble. You can ease back your own physical effort and the sound will literally continue to grow. How cool is that? Finally, we reach Section 5, when physics becomes emotion. We call this the fifth pillar. Because look, beyond the 4 intense technical conditions we've been talking about, there is a fifth pillar, and that's expression. This is the genuine emotional intent behind the song. And here's the beautiful part. When 4 singers truly connect to a shared, genuine feeling, their bodies tend to coordinate naturally from the inside out. Their breath settles, their energy aligns, and the group actually finds that lock and ring with significantly less conscious technical effort. The raw human feeling actually drives the physics. This right here represents the absolute pinnacle of the craft. It's the magical point where the relentless technique becomes completely invisible. As our sources so perfectly state, it's the moment when listeners stop admiring how well the chord rings and simply feel what it is saying. The stunning, massive acoustic size of the expanded sound ultimately exists entirely at the service of human emotion. So I'm going to leave you with this to ponder. The next time you are out listening to live music and you hear a perfectly locked chord, when you experience that blooming, expanded sound that physically rattles your chest, will you just feel the emotional magic of the performance? Or will you picture the magnificent, precise physics happening in the air to make it all work? Hopefully, after today, you can deeply appreciate both. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep listening closely.